Okay, so this video is a review of the JavaScript DOM and how to access and manipulate it using jQuery. So the first question is, what is the DOM? The DOM stands for Document Object Model, which is the hierarchy in which a browser views a website. It's a tree or a family structure with parents and children and siblings. So you can see over here, we start with the document. The document has a single child, HTML. HTML has two children, head and body. Because head and body have the same parent, then they're considered siblings, and HTML is considered the parent of both head and body. Head has one child called title, and child has a text child, which says my page. Body, on the other hand, has two children, H1 and UL. UL then has LI children as well. Important to note that UL and H1 are siblings, but H1 and title are not siblings because they do not have the same parent. jQuery provides us with methods to move through the document, as well as to remove elements from the document and to add elements to the document as well. And this happens on the fly without having to leave the page. So some review of some basic jQuery methods for elements that exist on the page. We have the text method, the HTML method, the val method, and CSS. Text will access or replace the text inside of a HTML element. HTML allows us to access or replace any HTML inside of an element. Val allows us to access or replace the value of a input, and then CSS allows us to access the value of a property or set the value of a property. So over here on the right, you can see some examples. If I find the ID of one and call text, that's getting the text that's in there and storing it in this variable A. I can also use that text function to set the text of something. So in this case, we're getting all of the H3 elements on the page and we're setting their text to this is a header. HTML works kind of the same way as text, except it allows us to access and add HTML. So in this one, I'm getting any HTML inside of the element that has ID 2 and storing it in B. And in this one, I'm getting anything that has a class of setMe and setting its HTML to be an H4 that has done written inside of it. And then CSS is the same kind of thing. Here, I find the element with ID C, and I can get its color attribute, the value of its color, so blue, red, pink, orange, and store that in this variable. And then down here, I can set color of all LIs in an OL using standard CSS saying OLLI. This is just the LIs inside of an OL, and I'm going to change all of their colors to blue. One of the things that we're going to need to be able to do, especially because we will be accessing information from a database, is that we're going to need to be able to create new elements. So when we create an element in jQuery, it's done like this. I do the $, which is the shorthand for jQuery, and then I create the element in quotes using the HTML syntax. And I store that in this variable. Now I can set the text of that and I can change the CSS of that. So now this is a div node that says hello in the color yellow. This is kind of separated for readability, but for simplicity's sake, I can do this in a single line because jQuery uses chaining. So I create the div and then dot text hello dot CSS color yellow. Uh, One of the important things to do here is to note that we are saving this information in a variable. I've called it div node, so that I can use that node to insert into the DOM at a later time. This process of creating a code, of creating a node and getting ready to add it somewhere can happen right in the ready method as soon as the page loads. It can happen inside some kind of an action like a mouse over or a click, or it can even happen in the success or error state of an AJAX event. All right. So now we're going to talk about navigating the DOM. There's several different methods that we can use. You'll see them listed below. They are children, siblings, parent, find, first, last, next, and prev. So while the page is live, this allows me to enter the document and kind of move around. A lot of times when we want to access an element in a document, it has an ID, but it would be silly to make every element in our page have an ID. And again, uh, as we add things live to the document or remove them from the document, things change, order changes, the relationships, the hierarchy changes. So being able to navigate our way through alleviates the need to put an ID on every single tag that we put inside the document. So here's that same example of a web page, and in this case, I'm going to get the children of the body tag. And so we come over here, we look at the body tag, and we see that the children are H1 and UL. So that gets all of them and it puts them in a list. Let's be clear, that list is not an array. It is a list more like an array list in Java or something of that sort. So we can't use array notation to get at things in it. Instead, what we have to do is we have to iterate over the list. jQuery provides us with an each function. So I'm going to say list.each. Right now, the things in the list are H1 and UL. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the one that I'm currently referring to, which is this, and I'm going to change its color to blue. And what that's going to do is it's going to change the H1 color to blue, and then it's going to cycle through and go to the UL and change its color to blue as well. All right, so children gets a list of all of the children of an element. Siblings work the same way. Siblings finds an element and then creates a list of all of those siblings. In this case, we're looking at H1, and then we're going to get all the siblings, which is just in this case the UL tag. Again, we can go through and cycle through that, and it's list.each and this.hide. And what that would do is hide this entire unordered list. Parent goes up the chain. So remembering that each um, element only has one parent. So if I go to title and I find the parent, that is the head. That's now stored in this variable, and I can do whatever I want with it. I can change it, I can alter it, I can get rid of it, all those kinds of things. I can find something. I can find a tag, I can find a class, I can find an ID. So in this case, I'm going to access the body tag and I'm going to find all of the LI tags. And so these are these ones down here. At that point, it's returning a list for me, and I can cycle through that list using the same jQuery each loop that I had used previously and alter them, alter their appearance, alter their content. I can make them appear or disappear or all kinds of first and last is also used for accessing or navigating the DOM. So in this case, when I get a list of something, so if I go into the body and I find the LI tags, here they are, I find these two LI tags. So remember, they're coming back to me in a list. If I say find li dot first, then it's finding this LI tag, the one that contains Android. And if I do body dot find li dot last, then I get the last thing in the list, which is this one that contains the iOS text. Next and prev are also used for cycling through. So if I go into body and I get children, which is the H1 of the UL, and I say dot first, which is now the H1, and I say dot next, next is then going to move siblings. Okay. So I'm going to move siblings here. And so I end up with the UL. Or if I do body dot children dot last dot prev, that sends me to the thing previous in the list. And that would be this H1. Okay, so now we're going to talk about modifying the DOM. Now that we know how to work our way through, we're going to look at modifying the DOM, and this is how we're going to add children. We use append and prepend. So append adds something to the end, adds a child to the end, and prepend adds a child to the beginning. So you'll see here, I'm going to make a win node, and I create that as an LI, and I add text windows. And then I go to the one UL that's on the page, and I append win node. And so append, here's the UL, append adds an LI at the end of the list. Prepend, on the other hand, adds a child at the beginning of the list. Really important to remember that append and prepend are used for adding children. All right. So they're adding inside of the thing that we're creating. If you want to add siblings, then we have to use before and after. And so this gets a little confusing. So because it's different than prev and next. Prev and next are for accessing. Before and after are for adding. And before and after specifically are for adding siblings. So creating the same kind of situation, I create my win node and I go to UL and I find its children and I find its last child and I do dot after and I add that win node. And so that's adding this. It finds the last LI and adds a sibling after it. Similarly, if I go in and I find the children and I find the first one and I do dot before, now I'm adding a sibling prior to that. All right. So the important thing here is to realize that in the previous page, I was working off of the UL and adding children to it. And now here, where I'm talking about before and after, I'm working on these LI tags and I'm doing after and before to add siblings. I can also delete nodes, things that were in the page, and get rid of them. So for example, if I do li.first.remove, that comes to the list of LIs, it finds the first one of them and it removes it. So this BlackBerry LI will be removed. Or if I do empty, that empties all the children from an element. So if I come to the head tag and type empty, then it gets rid of the title and the text inside of the title. If I went to body and typed empty, then all of this information would disappear and the page would appear blank. Um, since we know PHP and MySQL and Ajax, we can now use all of that in combination with the DOM to change our page on the fly. So this is an example. So we have a search bar inside of our web page, and we have the person enter something in there. They click the search button, and then that click function calls this Ajax function. We're going to send over the search for, and we're going to get a response because in that PHP that's being called by the Ajax, we're going to query a database and information is going to come back to us. And let's just say that they found one thing. Well, in this case, we would take that response, we create an LI node that was not there before, we add the response as the text of the LI node, I find the list that was already in existence, and I append that LI node. Sometimes the list isn't in existence, and I've got to create that as I go. I would have to create a UL or an OL, and then I would have to add LIs inside of that. It's just one more thing that we can do in the result of an Ajax call as a way to take what's coming back from PHP and MySQL and integrate it into the page that we're currently viewing without having to refresh that page or to go to another page. Really important that you practice this. I've got a link here that takes you to some practice problems. The first one is just accessing and traversing the DOM. The second one is manipulation of the DOM. The third level is application development, and then there's actually a fourth level that has some application development with working with PHP and MySQL through Ajax, and then using the DOM to alter the page. The link to the practice problems is here. Good luck.